Hey there, folks, and welcome back to the I Am CDB project. I, of course, am your host, CDB. You are not. And today I wanted to mention the Harry's razor, and I'll do a head shave as well, and maybe blab about other things. But a viewer today, and I'm sorry, sir, I can't recall your name off the top of my head, and emailed me a day or so ago about the Harry's razor, and he pointed out something that it's not a design flaw per se because they say they designed the razor not for head shaving, but he pointed out something with respect to this razor, which is it comes apart very, very easy. The head just sort of slips right off. So if you go to knock it on the sink like that, oftentimes the head will come off. That is a difference between Harry's and, say, a Gillette. You can kind of slam it on the sink and the head won't come off typically. With this razor, if it gets clogged and you try to sort of tap it a few times vigorously on the sink, as people do with carts, this will come off. It's come off many, many times. For me, when I do that, I don't have to do it a lot, but when I do, the tip usually comes off. And what the viewer suggested was that maybe Harry's wasn't, or maybe Harry's weren't a fan of me singing the virtues of this razor with respect to head shaving because they're afraid that as you're using it, that might pop off and maybe get sideways or cut you in some way. If you don't know the story, I've told it on the channel a number of times. I talked about how wonderful this is for head shaving, and it is for me. It has never come apart for me. Let me just say that. So I'm not saying it will come apart. I'm saying that it does come off easy. I never really thought about it until the viewer mentioned it. It has not come off for me, but I talked about using this for head shaving and how much I liked it. And I'd had an order for Harry's in for blades or something. They saw the video at some point and offered a refund and said, that razor's not for head shaving. We're going to design something for head shaving. Well, it's been 2 years and nothing has come to fruition on that front as far as I know. Maybe they're developing something. I don't know, but they seem to indicate at the time that they might be. But they very specifically said this is not designed for head shaving. So perhaps this issue is part of the reason. I do not know. It certainly doesn't happen with something like a Gillette Fusion. Unless you press the button, for the most part, that will not come off. Not the case with this. So that's something to consider. I still think Harry's is a good value relative to, the other carts like the Gillette Fusion. The blades for this are considerably more expensive if you buy them in the store than this. I think Harry's is a good value. It always does a good job for me, but that is something to keep in mind, and it's something that was mentioned by a viewer, and I think it's worth mentioning that, look, it's just that simple. It comes apart. Probably not the best design. I would like to see some sort of locking mechanism on, maybe they have some razors that have locking mechanism, but this one, certainly does not. That said, still good money for the, it's a good price for the blades as I see it, and it works perfectly fine for me. Today I'm going to use a little Purezzo Blue, as it's called often. I'm just going to wet the dome here, and then maybe I'll just dab a few spots on the dome and work it that way. I don't do this very often, but let's just give it a go and see what happens. Okay, just a little bit there. We'll just work it in and see how it goes. Of course, we'll get our brush wet still using the old West Coast shaving brush there, and we'll get going today. And we will be using the Harry's, just since I've been talking about it. Again, it's always worked very well for me. I haven't had any problems with it. Be careful when you get too much water in your brush. If you're making a lather on your head, it can run in your eyes, and of course, soap in the eyes or lather in the eyes is not a good thing, as you well know. If you've ever had soap in your eyes, and I would imagine most of us have. I think I'm just going to do a one pass today, just for the sake of brevity on the camera anyway. So for some reason, my lather is not doing very well. So my method here was not very good. Let's let's try to make a little bit in the bowl. It's rare that I have something like that happen, but evidently it didn't like my method here. So let's put a little Proraso Blue in our trusty Pereira bowl. And we'll make a little lather this way, because this one is lackluster. And folks, this is a good example of if something's not to your liking, don't be afraid to stop. Change it up, make it right. There's no sense to work through a bad shave just because it didn't work out. I'm gonna make it work and I'm just gonna power through it. It's a bad blade, I'm just gonna power through it. That is the worst possible thing you can do. So if you have something that isn't working, fix it. So I just went to the bowl, you know, put a little cream in there, and now we'll press right on. I must have made an error there in some form or fashion, or not had enough product, or doesn't really matter, because you can remedy it. Don't press on for the sake of, you know, I've seen people making videos about this is the, you know, 18th consecutive shave on a blade. It's getting really rough, but I want to power through it. I don't see any point in doing that. The minute that it feels uncomfortable, don't do it. And that's pretty much, yeah, I think that works in a lot of cases. You know, if it's that uncomfortable, shaving, this is why a lot of us got into traditional shaving to begin with, because we did have very uncomfortable shaves with carts. And that was typically when we used gel and we didn't lather our face properly, and we tried to do it all in one pass, and it was very uncomfortable. The whole reason people like me came to traditional shaving was out of, I want to get a better shave. It stinks. You know, I had abandoned razors like this in favor of electric. I had a Braun like Series 7 or something, I want to say. Because I'd just pretty much given up on blades. Of course, I didn't really know, in my estimation, the best way to shave properly, even though I was taught. But it was the one pass, use your blade way longer than it was supposed to method, which is really not the way to do it. As anybody who knows, who probably follows this channel, or, you know, fancies traditional style of shaving anyway. It's not just about the tradition. I like that part of it. But as you know, I have evolved over the years to understand that you can use modern equipment using a traditional method and achieve the same results, or at least many of you can, I'm sure, if you attempt it. Now, you may not like it, but it will work in a pinch if need be. And I found that, at least certainly on my head, this is the way to go. I've tried numerous DEs and none get as close as these do, given the same effort. So in the same amount of strokes, same amount of effort, I can't get as close with the DE, single edge, you name it. It just doesn't work as well for me. And I've tried it a lot over the last couple of years. And so there's no sense in that being the case, I'm going to use a DE just because it's traditional. Look, if it doesn't work, go with whatever does. And I get emails all the time from people who say, thank you for finally bringing carts to a traditional shaving channel and speaking of them in terms that's not entirely insulting. I've gotten a lot of emails over the last, since I've been talking about carts a little bit, year or two. And like, thank you. Everybody else, carts are crap, carts are crap, carts are crap. Now, that said, I still have quite a few DEs and I like to use them. But for my head, like I said, this is just the way that works best for me. And I'm an advocate of going with whatever gives you the best end result for the money you spend. So getting the most value out of your equipment, the best shave, and the best experience. So if $100 soap is affordable to you, and $100 aftershave, and a $400 razor, and that gives you the best experience, go with it. I don't feel that's the case for most people, because most people simply can't afford it. And secondly, I personally don't believe that paying that kind of money, having done it, dummy me, I mean, I've done it. It really doesn't do that much that what I'm using now does not do. So just take that for what it's worth. Anyway, as you can see here, it doesn't come apart. I guess it could come apart, like I'm just sort of hitting back on what I said earlier. I want to thank the gentleman who emailed that in. I'm sorry I've forgotten your name. But it's worth mentioning, I think. And thank you for that piece of information. I really never considered it, but I can tell you this. See right there, I just hit this razor on the sink. Blade flew off. That is, now that I think about it, it's not the best design. I hope Harry's either comes out with a design that incorporates some sort of lock in this mechanism. Maybe they already have it and don't know it, but it does not lock. Now, that said, there is a notch there. It's got a little bit of soap residue in it, but even when it's new, this pulls off incredibly easy. So potentially not the best design. However, I will say the blades are good. The blades are affordable. It has worked well for me. So if you're going to try a car, you don't want to spend as much as these ridiculously priced Gillette blades. It's worth a shot, but do keep in mind, that. And thank you, sir. Thank you to the gentleman who pointed that out. Thanks also to all of you who watch. Fortunately, I've had the good fortune of having a little more time to do a few videos in the evenings, and I'm happy to do that, happy to be back at least making a few as time permits. It may stop very abruptly at some point when things get very busy again, but until it does, I want to thank you for joining me. Of course, the channel wouldn't be around without the folks who watch, so I do really appreciate it. Until next time, I have been your host, CDB. You are not. God bless.